All right. Hello, everybody. Uh, Thanks for joining. Uh, we're going to have a theme today because I keep seeing these advertising for free masterclass, and they don't use the word free, they say no cost, right? Um, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Let's start off by saying that I'm not trying to discourage anybody from uh, looking into that, right? If that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But let's talk about what should be going through your mind when you look at this stuff, right? So, uh, here's what happens. And by the way, let me give you a little bit of background from my perspective, right? I've been studying sales and business since the early 90s, maybe later. Hello, Karen. Karen says, "Hi, Eddie. I went to a jazz band concert last night and noticed that the trumpets were playing with flat fingers. Is that a style thing? I don't know if they always do that." Uh, so, it's not best, but what happens is that people find what works for them for that horn. And sometimes, yes, it can be laziness. So sometimes it's laziness. But a lot of times it's because that horn will have sticky valves. And so now I tell my students when you have sticky valves to lift you guys have heard me talk about that before. But it depends on who had the trumpet before or how long they've been played like that. If the trumpet has been played like that for a long time, then uh, yeah, it might need to be played that way. It depends. Anyway, so yes, there's a whole bunch of ads on social media. Oh, I was telling you about my background. I've studied sales, I've studied business, I've studied small business. Uh, and the thing is, I know all about all that stuff because I read about it. And I'm going to tell you, I'm about to lose my voice again. Uh, the dialysis stuff is sometimes brutal, especially on a Friday. Uh, so, um, so yes, I've studied all this stuff. I know how it works. The first trick I learned when I studied sales is that you have to make it sound like they have to decide now. And there's a reason why they do that to you. If you believe them, then you don't take any time to think about your purchase. They don't want you to think about the purchase, right? They want you to make a choice now. Uh, that was the very first thing I ever learned, and I've learned really hundreds of tricks, and they're not nice. And my response to all of it was, I can't do this. This goes against my beliefs. This goes against my Christian beliefs. And so when I don't have a problem doing business, and I don't fault non-Christians for doing what they do, right? Because they don't have a a, a, a commandment to love other people. I can tell you when you tell someone falsely that they only have 5 minutes to figure out whether they're going to buy this or not. When you tell them that, that's not love. I can tell you that. It's not love. That's not someone's doing because they love you. That's someone who's trying to make you not think so that you buy their product. Um, so, yes, I do have a background in this stuff. I don't use 99% of what I've learned. I could, if I didn't have any values, I could. I hope that makes sense. If I didn't have moral values, I could do exactly what these guys are doing because I've read about all of it. Um, and the only reason I'm talking about it now is because there's just so much of it. If you're on social media at all, including YouTube, it's called funnels. The technique they use is called funnels, where you get people interested. How do you get them interested? You've got to have bait. You've got to dangle something in front of them that they want, and they're having trouble getting. So you have to have bait. And that bait is usually something that is far beyond the reach of a normal person. Okay? That bait is stuff like having a better sex life. That's like the ultimate, right? Because people will pay anything and they'll believe anything to get that. Well, what we have in the trumpet community that's like the whole sex thing is high notes, range, high notes and range, endurance, beautiful sound. We've talked about those things here. Nobody can teach you that stuff. I can't teach you that stuff. What I can do is help you create an environment for yourself that you create that for yourself. So if someone is trying to sell you, and by the way, what are they trying to sell you? I have here, I've pulled up the guy that teaches all these musicians how to con you this way. I shouldn't have said con you, but the guy that's teaching all these musicians to use his system to sell you their products. What is he selling? He wants the music teachers to be able to work fewer hours and earn more money. They want to build a consistent, scalable income. Does that sound like love? Does that sound like somebody who's putting you first? That sounds like a car salesman to me. Okay? This is what he's teaching them. And so when you see these ads, they're usually labeled as a no-cost masterclass. And they're going to teach you how to get a beautiful sound, how to play with no body tension, how to have more endurance, and how to get a better range. All those things that are out of our reach, they're going to say that they have a way that makes it easy. And it's not. What they're doing is trying to make money off of you. We have evidence of it here. And there was one guy that's a student of this guy who I think, if there are thinking individuals, would have lost all his clout because he advertised on Facebook. He said he needs a successful sales rep. Huh? He needs a successful sales rep. In other words, he's making so much money off of his courses or whatever it is that they sell. He's making so much money that he can now hire somebody who does the sales for him. Does that sound like love to you? That's not love. I'm sorry. Okay? That's not love. And like I said, I'm not trying to discourage anybody. Maybe there is somebody that's got a lot of money and doesn't mind paying the money that they're looking for. But, I was looking, I did some research on this, looking for reviews for these individuals, right? And, right, you know what? They were also saying, how much does this stuff cost? And one of the things I found out that their courses are oftentimes more expensive than going to a university. So it's not, if we were not talking about $100, let me reword that. If we were talking about $100 or $400 or $800, then I wouldn't be saying anything. But these guys are asking for thousands of dollars. They're asking for thousands. And maybe you can talk them down or something like that. But if you can afford that, you can afford to go to a university. That's one of the points that was being made when I was doing the research. And, here's how I see it. These guys want to make more money. They feel that and in fact, this guy even said, he wants you to make the money you think you deserve. See, that's his sales pitch to the teachers. He wants the teachers to make the money that they deserve. Here's the problem with that. That's not how the market works. The better you are, the more in demand you are. If you have to do something to get an income that's higher than what you get teaching, then you're not a very good teacher. Because the market, if the market doesn't support you, so this is one of the things they say, and I know all about this. I live this, right? I know all about this. We, as music teachers, there's a ceiling to how many lessons we can make, right? There's a ceiling. We can't go past a certain number of lessons. There's only so much time in a year, so much time in a week. So there is a ceiling. So the only way, so they say, that's proof that it's not scalable. Well, the reason it's not scalable is because you're not charging more, right? You're not charging more. If you need to charge exorbitant amounts, but you've never really gone through that process of learning how to teach. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure, just as it is with all these things, I'm sure there are some people who have been able to benefit from this kind of course. I'm sure there's people that have. How many? How many? You know, I had a guy with my ex-wife. My ex-wife uh, signed up for a gym membership, and I was able to go in as her spouse. But I had to do a interview first before I could use any of the, the equipment. And it's not really an interview, it's a sales pitch. And this guy tried to fat shame me. Yes, I was fat back then. He tried to, he asked me, uh, wouldn't I like this, and that? It's all the same stuff. This sales stuff is all the same across the board. The way they sell to you is to try to sell you something that you so far in your life have fallen short in trying to get. That's how this works. I'm going to move this so I'm not looking up. Okay, sorry about that. So that's what they're trying to do, is they tap into these things that are realistically beyond your control. They're beyond your control, at least in the short term, beyond your control. So, you know, one thing to keep in mind is that the only thing they possibly could be selling is information. That's the only thing. I do think that they have one-on-one. From what I read, they do have some one-on-one meetings. And once again, I read about that. I know how that works. You don't have one-on-one with the guy that's selling the course. You have one-on-one with the people he hires to meet with you. So he's at the top of that pyramid making all the money, and you get to meet with his underlings that he says are certified to teach his course. So there is some one-on-one. But when you look at how much you're paying and how much help you're getting, it really is just information. And I even saw, when I was doing my homework on this subject, I even saw some people say, yes, it is just information, but I didn't want to have to go looking for that information. I would rather have somebody spell it out for me for that kind of money. Right? And like I said, if that's you, that's fine. If that's you, if that's where you're at in your life, you don't want to do the research yourself, you don't want to do the thinking yourself, you don't want to have to look through stuff and read it yourself. You would rather have somebody tell you what to do. Now remember, that would almost be worth it if it wasn't so expensive and it wasn't no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee that what worked for other people is going to work for you. The difference between what they're selling and private lessons is that with private lessons, you have somebody there to help you. With private lessons, you have a teacher that has a trained ear that can say, this is what's good, this is what's bad, here's what we're going to do about it. And take you as a person into account. Hello, Jeffrey. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that. I was going to make a video about it, but then I saw that this time opened up, and I just thought we would make that the theme. You don't have to ask questions about this theme. I just wanted to talk about it. So instead of making a video, I'm almost ready to make videos again. Uh, I got the new computer. I got new earmuffs for my headphones. And now all I have to do is find the time. So, but yeah, I'm ready to get back into it. I also need to buy some software. The software I use is per computer, and it doesn't transfer to the new computer. It's cheap enough. I just have to get it. So we're almost ready to start again with the videos. Uh, anyway, so if anyone's got questions about anything trumpet related, uh, this sales stuff, I think it's important. I actually believe everybody should learn how to sell, so that you recognize it when you see it. And when I was doing my research, I saw people say, "Well, if you're dumb enough," and I don't share this sentiment, and even if I did share, I wouldn't say it this way. But they say, if you're dumb enough to pay for something like that, you got what you deserved. Um, so, and that's sort of how I feel, except I don't think people are dumb, right? There's just things that people don't always understand because they don't stop to think. And a lot of times it's because the salesperson won't let them stop to think. That happened to me in the hospital. I told them, no, I won't do this, what you're talking about right now. It turns out I will be doing it, but I told them not right now. I've got these other things I'm working through with my health, and I'm not going to just get scared. They tried to use fear tactics on me. Once again, a sales tactic, right? And by the way, the guy that's trying to teach all these teachers, he calls them tactics. He's trying to teach the teachers his tactics. But anyway, yes, the sales tactics that they use at the hospital are oftentimes just like what they use at the car dealership. So yeah, you have to be, uh, that old saying, buyer beware. Don't trust the people trying to sell you. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I hate to see it. I really, really hate to see it. You know that these guys wouldn't be advertising the way they do if they weren't making money. So people are falling for it. There are people signing up. I bet $5 if you try to get your money back, it's not going to happen. So anyway, what other questions do you guys have? What other questions do you have? With my lessons, I have a lot of things that I do. You could call them tactics, but they're anti-sales tactics, right? Because the number of people who contact me for lessons and then eventually take lessons is about 1 out of 10. So for every new student that I get, I have to answer, uh, and I do gladly, right? I have to answer uh, at least nine, excuse me, at least 9 emails. And what I do, and maybe this costs us students, I don't know. But what I do is I just tell them where the information is. And then I say, if I hear back from you, we'll get you set up for a lesson. That's not how it's supposed to work. If you're a salesperson, that's not sales. But you know what? I read a sales book one time talking about, it's written by a Christian, and he's going through all the things that are evil about sales, and then how sales is supposed to be done. Because he says, like, if you're 30, 40 years into your career, people trust you if you were a good salesman. They know you're not trying to rip them off. They know you're not just interested in fleecing them for their money. And if you can develop a rapport with people that's honest and open, then the people will know that when they need a new car, they'll go to you because they know you're not going to rip them off. And I feel the same way about lessons. The way I do it, sure, there might be some people that are expecting me to sell them. Um, and I won't do that, right? Instead, what I do is I make myself available so that the people who do need lessons can get them without having to go through all that. So it's almost, like I said earlier, almost like anti-sales. I do all the stuff they say you're not supposed to do. Why do they say you're supposed to do the other stuff? Because you're not going to, and I also understand that the other teachers are probably doing all this stuff. And it could be that someone will get my email, my response, but while they're shopping around, get an email from somebody that does sales tactics. And so I understand that the way I do it will probably cost me students if those students are those kinds of people. They want to be sold to. Um, I understand that. But I can't, there's different ways to do business, and I can't do that stuff. I really can't. Now, I can learn from that and do things that are okay, that are loving. I can learn from that. And, you know, anyway, I'm ready for questions if you guys have any. The thing is, and we've talked so much about this, the thing is you can't teach anybody how to get a good sound. Yes, there are some teachers that have students that have good sounds. Um, how many of those teachers were able to take students with bad sounds and turn them around? And of those, if we compare how many students they had that were absolute, in their mind, I don't think of it this way, but in their mind, absolute failures because they didn't get the sound that they were trying to sell, right? So I've been studying the sound thing for decades. There's something that has to happen inside your head before you can get a good sound. There's something that has to happen. And nobody can push buttons to make you have that. What we can do, this is my opinion, right? What we can do for you to get a better sound is change your environment. Listen, the most important thing is listen to great trumpet players. And that listening should be done. The closer you are to the actual trumpet player, the better. So at the bottom of the list, we have recordings that have no video. Then we have recordings with video. Oh, excuse me. Then we have live performances, like from in a concert hall. And then we have chamber performances. And then I always tell people the ultimate best in listening is sharing the gig with another great player. That's the ultimate. You will gain more benefit from that than any other kind of listening. You'll gain more benefit in that than paying somebody thousands of dollars for a course. And if you're not the kind of person that, because there's a lot of guys online that are proud of the fact that they're self-taught and they don't want to take lessons. If you're that kind of player, then I strongly recommend that instead of taking lessons, why don't you hire a great trumpet player to play duets with you? Right? Why don't you hire somebody to just spend a half hour or an hour a week? If you can't afford that, make it every other week or once a month. But hire someone who sounds the way you would like to sound. And it'll cost you a whole bunch less than paying for one of those courses. A whole bunch less. And see, I already said it, I just have to say it again. I wouldn't have a problem with any of those courses if they weren't so expensive. So, yeah, if you want to get a better sound, find somebody to play with that has a great sound. That's the first step. The other step is to practice certain exercises. Things like that. Anyway, I won't go too much into that. Oh, we've talked about that stuff here before. So, any questions? Any trumpet questions? Any music questions? Jazz questions? Hello, Dennis. Nice to see you. Dennis says, I find it helpful to be in bands where there are good trumpet players to emulate. That's right. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And see, the thing is, we were talking about this in college. We were already talking about this in college back in the 80s. A great sound is often learned through osmosis. We called it osmosis back then. But we don't understand how it happens. You sit next to somebody that has a great sound for long enough, and you start to have the same great sound that they had. And see, another thing I don't like about these advertisements is that they're going in the wrong direction. You've heard me say many times about how important it is, the cultural side of what we do. But what these courses do for you is separate you more and more and more from that culture. Hello, Sean. Nice to see you. Sean says, at what year do you consider a horn vintage? Do you think vintage horns, for the most part, sound better than the new horns? Uh, so first question, vintage, I think, is 50 years. Is that correct? Let's look it up. Let me look it up real quick. There are people who use, okay, it's pretty vague. 20 to 100 years. I was going to say 50. Here's someone saying 25 plus. Really, I'm going to stick to 50. Really. So, do I think that the old horns sound better? I think that the old horns can sound better. Uh, keep in mind that technology changed. So what we have today, I'm starting to get my voice back. What we have today is computer controlled, that's the CNC, right? CNC lathes, CNC routers, so that you can get the same trumpet every single time. Before that technology, the instruments were all different. You could look at the exact same model, and yet the instruments were different. So in the old days, professional trumpet players would fly to New York or New Jersey or Boston, where the stores would have racks of all different kinds of trumpets, like 20, I'm making this up, but 20 uh, Bach 37s, 20. I've never been there, that's why I'm making it up, but you get the idea. 20 of each of these models, and you play through the model you like to find the one of that model that works for you. So it's not automatic. I think there's potential for a vintage horn to sound great. I have a vintage horn that sounds great. My flugelhorn sounds great. But this was before that technology, and not every flugel of that era, of that make, is going to be a great horn. So, should you shop for those instruments? Of course. Should you shop for them without playing them? I don't think so. I hope that makes sense. Any other questions? That was a good question. Any other questions? So let me tell you guys what I've been up to. I've had. Oh, let me see. Karen says, when did the horns become all the same in production? I want to say early 90s. That's also a good question, because if we're talking about that, we should know when that date is. I think it's early 90s. I could be wrong about that. You know what I think used to happen in the past? I think people used to just make what they had work. They would make it work, because you didn't. A lot of people, think about it. A lot of people didn't have money to travel to try out instruments. I sure wasn't one of them, right? and you end up with the horn that you've got. That's something that my teacher Dick Schaefer would always talk about, because I would always complain that I didn't have fancy equipment, and he says, no, it's the horn that you got. And he would have an abbreviation, the Thhig. He would say it's Thhig, the horn that you've got, or something like that, Thtig, or something like that. And yeah, I think back in those days, you just had to do what you had to do with what you had. And, that's just another way that we today are so spoiled, because, first of all, we can try out horns. If you live in Texas, the best place to try out horns is, no, you don't, it's not like what I'm talking about, where you try a whole bunch of the different of one model. But if you go to TMEA, pay to get into the exhibit, now you get to try every horn that's out there, right? Now there's an art to picking a horn, because sometimes you can buy something that you like so much that it won't have any usefulness outside of you just enjoying it. Right? That is actually a thing. I've had students that did that. They bought something that they really, really, really liked because it just sounded a certain way. But a lot of times, what we have to do as musicians is play a variety of different ways, right? And a trumpet that is too far off to the one direction, a trumpet like that cannot be adapted to a different situation. That's why I like my trumpet so much, is I've played every kind of gig you can think of. Is it ideal as a lead trumpet? No, it's not ideal. Is it ideal as a small jazz group horn? No, it's not ideal. Is it ideal for classical music? No, it's not ideal. But it's sort of like equal temperament, right? You guys probably know that equal temperament is when all of the notes are equally out of tune, so that no single note sounds badly out of tune, right? That's what equal temperament is. This is sort of like that, except not with pitch, but with practical application to the kind of music that we play. So I love my horn, not because it's so good at doing all these things, but because it's equally bad at all of them. Right? Does that make sense? So I have my trumpet is a large bore 72 reverse pipe and light bell, like it's got the star bell. It's a beautiful, beautiful horn. A few years ago, I was looking to replace it because it's getting old. That's why I replaced my flugelhorn. It's getting old. When I bought the new parts for my flugelhorn, the guy I bought it from in Chicago told me that this is probably the last set. If I want to have these replaced again later, that I would have to have them machined. So I didn't want to beat my flugelhorn into the ground. I've had that flugelhorn since the 1980, and I didn't want to kill it. I don't mind going to a machinist and having a part made, but I thought, why should I do that? Use it when I want to use it, like in recordings and stuff like that. But on the gigs, I have this other horn now, and They sound very different. They both have beautiful sounds, but for entirely different reasons. Sean says, I started transcribing some more music or tunes, and I wonder how much benefit that is to me to do while I'm still trying to learn the assignments that you gave me. Is there a benefit to doing both? Of course, there's benefit. This is the essence of my accumulative method. Everything you do counts towards your progress. Everything you do counts towards your progress, even if you screwed it up badly, even if you did something that gave you a screwed up embouchure. Everything you do counts towards your progress. So, is it ideal? Yes, it's also ideal. Transcribing is always beneficial. I have students that come in and they haven't done their assignment and they say, well, instead I did this other thing. And I used to get upset about that. But if I believe in this art of accumulative practice, then it's the only way I would say, oh, that you're doing, don't do that. The only way I would say that is if they had a deadline, they wanted to accomplish a specific thing within a certain time, and they're off smelling the roses, so to speak, then I would have to say, you know what, cut back on that, please, or you're not going to make your deadline. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about with the sales stuff, right? I'm not trying to make you a great player. I'm trying to help you get where you want to go. If that is you being a great player, then that's fine. But if you, like for somebody, if someone says, I want to make all region, well, then there's certain things that have to happen in a certain order. And if you're not getting that stuff done because you're doing other stuff, well, then I'm not sure why you're taking lessons. But if you don't have a deadline like that, then yeah, it's do my stuff, do their stuff, do everything that comes to your mind. Karen says, what parts would you replace on a flugelhorn? Do you clean it the same way as a trumpet? The parts I replaced are the valve guides. In the old, so this is part of what happened. This is part of my flugelhorn story. In the old flugelhorns, they had guides that wore down very fast. And that's the model I have. They changed that model so that the guides wouldn't wear down so badly, right? So the guides for my flugelhorn, as it is, are not used anymore. The only ones are those old flugelhorns that need those guides. Yamaha is no longer making those guides. So that's when the guy told me these are probably the last ones on planet Earth, right? I took him seriously because I do know that the model was changed. And then, do you clean it the same way as a trumpet? Yes, for the most part. For the most part. You guys know that I think you know, I use spitballs. I do that quite often. So I don't do a full cleaning, but maybe once a year. And to tell you the truth, recently it hasn't been a year because I was so sick, and now I don't have time. But I think the spitballs do a great job. If you don't know what spitballs are, let me grab a bottle. So this is an oil bottle that I keep. I don't think you're supposed to wash the sponges, but I wash them. And then I keep putting more disinfectant in. So what you do is you put the spitball in the lead pipe and blow it through. I'll do 6 times. 6 times. I do 3 times with the valves all the way down, 3 times with the valves all the way up. That way we're getting all those little tubes in between the valves. Okay? Dennis says, my Model 37 Buck is 50 years old. When is it time for something newer? 2 problems on the old instruments. The valves stop working. So if the valves are fine, I wouldn't worry about it. But you can also get leaks where the air is escaping. Usually that's either around the valve slide. So like if your valve slide is, if there's too much space between the male and female of the valve, air can escape. There's also escapage, escapage on the piping itself. So some people have very acidic hands, and they can have holes develop here. My hands have never really been all that acidic, and yet you can still see on my trumpet where my grip is. You can see my pinky finger here, the other finger, okay? But that instrument is 20, what is it? 20, almost 30 years old. 25 years. Not quite as old as yours. So yes, if you've got holes in the middle, now those holes can be patched. I think what they can't patch, what they can't fix, is if you wear through the valve casing. He says the third valve slide always falls to the end of the stop when it is sitting on it. So mine does too. I don't think that's necessarily a leak. Karen asks, what are the symptoms of air leakage? I don't know. I've never had a horn that long, and I don't think I've ever had a student with a horn like that. So I can't tell you. All I know is that's what people say, that if it leaks. Now, I had a friend in El Paso, and I reminded him of this when he joined Facebook and added me as a friend, right? I told him what I remembered about him before he left for California was that his trumpet had Band-Aids on it. He had a really, really old trumpet that had holes in it, and he put Band-Aids over the holes. So it can't be that bad, right? I think where it's really bad is when it leaks around the valves. That's when you're going to start having serious problems. But to tell you the truth, I don't know anything about that practically. I don't know what happens. I don't know what that does to your playing, because I don't have any experience with that. What else? That guy that I'm talking about, um, I'm sure he's still a great jazz player, right? But when I was just a freshman, that's when I got to meet him. I was a freshman at UTEP, and he was such a great jazz player at that age. You know, for me, I'd never heard anybody on the same bandstand as good as he was. I'm sorry to say I can't remember his name, and I think the reason I can't remember his name is he always went according to a nickname. If I remember this right, he had a nickname. I can't remember the real name or the nickname. Um, but yeah, he was a great player. He was a great player. He ended up moving to Los Angeles and made a living playing jazz trumpet in Los Angeles. I think he's back in El Paso now. I won't go into his full story. But yeah, he was a great player. I'm sure he's just as great now, if not lots better. Any other questions? We've got 4 minutes. I do have to leave right at 2:30 this time because I have. It's not a. He said it's not a gig. It's not a rehearsal. It's a run through for tomorrow's gig. So I'm sure it will end up being a rehearsal. I'm sure we'll have to see next time. I think we will have a Q and A next week for all of those who are wondering. Anyone want to get a last question in before we shut down? Once again, I'm glad I didn't lose my voice. My wife looked this up and she says it's common for people, dialysis patients. I still can't think of myself as a patient. It's common for dialysis patients to have this voice thing that I'm having trouble with. It has to do with the hydration, and when they take too much, I'm saying too much, they may not feel the same way as I do. It's too much. They take too much out. And it's not natural. There's nothing natural about it, right? It's a supernatural. Hello, Raimo. Nice to see you. It's supernatural dehydration. My nemesis, really. And that's why I have to keep sipping. Because I have to be able to play tonight. Any other questions? We're almost done. 1 minute and counting. Please, everybody, think about what I said. I would make me feel so bad if any of you guys ended up buying one of those courses that they're trying to sell and ended up not getting your money's worth. It would make me feel so bad. That's why I had to use this time to talk about that. All right. We're down to the last 30 seconds-ish. As always, thank you guys for hanging out. It's nice to see you. Nice to answer your questions. Let's do it again next week, I think. Now, I do have makeup lessons next week, so maybe not. We'll see. But I hope we do. All right. Miss you guys. All right. God bless you. See you next time. Have a Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas. And hopefully I'll see you before the New Year.